There are certain houses that seem to hold their breath after someone dies. The curtains remain still, the clocks continue ticking, the furniture stays exactly where it has always been. Yet something essential is missing, something invisible, something that can never truly be replaced. That was how my grandmother's house felt after she passed away. Quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that reminds you someone is no longer there. My name is Daniel Foster. I was 28 years old when I returned to the small village outside York, where my grandmother had lived for most of her life. She was 86 when she died, old enough that nobody could honestly say it was unexpected. But grief doesn't care about logic. It doesn't care about age. It simply arrives and settles wherever it pleases. My grandmother had been the center of our family for as long as I could remember. Christmas dinners, birthday cakes, Sunday afternoons spent drinking tea in her garden. Every important memory seemed to include her somehow. She possessed a rare gift, the ability to make people feel safe. No matter what was happening in your life, stepping through her front door somehow made everything feel a little less frightening. After the funeral, my mother asked if I could help clear the house. Eventually it would be sold. The practical realities of life always arrive shortly after loss. Bills, paperwork, boxes, the things nobody talks about at funerals. So one cold autumn morning I drove back to the village. Rain clouds hung low over the countryside. The narrow roads wound through fields touched by the first signs of winter. Everything looked exactly as I remembered, and yet completely different. The house stood at the end of a quiet lane bordered by old stone walls. A small garden surrounded it. Most of the flowers had already faded for the season. The front door creaked, exactly the way it always had. For a brief moment, I almost expected her voice to call out from the kitchen. "Daniel, is that you?" Instead, silence greeted me, the kind of silence that feels heavier than sound. The first few hours passed slowly, sorting clothes, folding blankets, opening drawers that hadn't been touched in years. Every object seemed attached to a memory. A teacup she always used, a pair of reading glasses, handwritten recipes tucked inside cookbooks. I found myself smiling one moment and fighting back tears the next. Grief rarely moves in a straight line. By late afternoon, I decided to tackle the attic. It had always fascinated me as a child. My grandmother kept decades of family history up there. Old furniture, Christmas decorations, boxes filled with forgotten treasures. The attic smelled exactly the same as I remembered. Dust, wood, time. A single small window allowed pale light to enter. Dust particles floated through the air like tiny ghosts. I began moving boxes toward the staircase. Most contained ordinary things. Old clothes, broken lamps, outdated magazines. Nothing remarkable. Then I found the trunk. It sat hidden behind a stack of furniture near the far wall. A large wooden chest covered in dust. The brass lock had long since rusted away. Something about it immediately caught my attention. Perhaps because I had never seen it before, or perhaps because it looked older than everything else around it. I knelt beside it and brushed away the dust. The wood creaked softly as I lifted the lid. Inside were photo albums. Dozens of them. Some wrapped in cloth, others bound in fading leather. Family photographs spanning generations. I smiled despite myself. Of course my grandmother would keep something like this. She never threw memories away. Outside rain began tapping gently against the roof. The attic grew quieter, more intimate somehow. I sat cross-legged on the floor and opened the first album. The next hour disappeared completely. Photographs have a strange power. They freeze moments that would otherwise vanish forever. A birthday party from 30 years ago. A summer picnic. A wedding. A family gathering. Faces smiled back at me from decades earlier. Some people were still alive. Others had long since passed away. Yet there they remained, forever preserved inside fading rectangles of paper. I saw photographs of my mother as a child, my grandfather standing proudly beside his first car, my grandmother as a young woman with bright eyes and a smile I instantly recognized. The years melted away, page after page. Eventually, I reached one of the newer albums. The photographs looked more familiar. School events, family holidays, pictures from my own childhood. I laughed softly as I found an image of myself covered in mud after falling into a pond. Another showed me holding a birthday cake far too large for a 6-year-old. The memories returned easily. Warm, comforting, safe. Then I turned another page, and everything changed. At first the photograph seemed ordinary. A young boy standing in a field, smiling, the sunlight bright against his face. The boy was me, around 5 years old, maybe 6. There was nothing unusual about that, until I looked closer. I frowned. Something felt wrong. The field stretched behind me toward a line of distant trees. Wildflowers covered the landscape. Rolling hills rose in the distance. It looked beautiful, almost dreamlike, yet I didn't recognize it. Not at all. I stared longer, trying to place the location, trying to remember. Nothing. The strange thing wasn't simply that I couldn't identify it. The strange thing was that I was absolutely certain I had never been there. Not once. Not ever. I examined every detail. The clothing, the season, the background. Anything that might trigger a memory. Nothing happened. The photograph remained unfamiliar. A tiny chill moved through me. I turned the picture toward the light. Maybe there was a note on the back. Some explanation. A date. A location. Anything. Carefully I removed it from the album. My hands froze immediately. There was no writing. No description. Nothing. Just the photograph itself. For several minutes, I sat in silence, listening to the rain above me, trying to understand why the image disturbed me so much. Perhaps I had simply forgotten. Childhood memories fade. That happens to everyone. Yet the certainty remained. Powerful. Unshakable. I had never stood in that field, and yet there I was, smiling directly into the camera, as if I belonged there, as if the photograph was proof of something impossible. The attic suddenly felt colder. The fading daylight outside deepened the shadows. I glanced back through the album, searching for more photographs from the same day. More clues. More answers. There were none. Only that single image. Alone. Waiting. A photograph that shouldn't exist. And though I couldn't explain why, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The picture was hiding a story. A story my family had forgotten. Or perhaps a story someone had never wanted me to remember. And deep down, before I even left the attic, I already knew I wasn't going to stop until I uncovered the truth. I didn't sleep much that night. The photograph remained on the bedside table beside my bed. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. The field, the wildflowers, the distant hills, and the small smiling boy standing in the middle of it all. Me, at 5 years old. A child standing somewhere he had never been. At least that was what I kept telling myself. The strange thing wasn't that I couldn't remember the place. Childhood memories are fragile things. They fade, they blur. Entire years can disappear into fragments. No, the unsettling part was the certainty. A certainty that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than memory. A feeling that the photograph was wrong, that it didn't belong among the other family pictures. By morning, I had convinced myself there was only one way to find answers. I needed to show it to my mother. 3 days later, I drove to her house. The autumn rain followed me across the countryside. Gray clouds hung low over the fields. Everything seemed quieter than usual, perhaps because I was nervous. I hadn't told her why I was coming, only that I wanted to discuss something I had found while cleaning Grandma's house. When she opened the door, she smiled warmly, the same smile she had inherited from her mother. For a brief moment, I almost abandoned the entire idea. Maybe the photograph meant nothing. Maybe there was a simple explanation, but curiosity had already gone too far. We sat together in the kitchen. Tea steamed gently from 2 mugs. The familiar scent reminded me of childhood visits. For several minutes, we spoke about ordinary things. The funeral, the house, family members. Neither of us mentioned the photograph. Finally, I reached into my bag. I found something in Grandma's attic. My mother nodded. There were probably thousands of old photographs up there. There was. I slid the picture across the table. Her smile disappeared instantly. The change was so sudden it frightened me. For several seconds, she simply stared. Her face turned pale. The mug slipped slightly in her hands. And then, to my complete shock, tears filled her eyes. My stomach tightened. Mum, she didn't answer. Instead, she continued staring at the photograph as though she had just seen a ghost. I had never witnessed that expression before. Fear. Not mild concern. Not confusion. Fear. The The kind that comes from encountering something buried long ago, something you hoped never to see again. "Mom," I repeated softly. "What is it?" She lowered her gaze. For a moment she seemed unable to speak. Then she wiped her eyes, took a slow breath, and looked at me. "Where did you find this?" "In Grandma's attic." The answer only seemed to make things worse. My mother leaned back in her chair, suddenly looking much older than she had a few minutes earlier. "I haven't seen that photograph in over 20 years. A chill moved through me. "You know it." She nodded. Slowly, reluctantly. I waited. The silence stretched. Rain tapped against the kitchen window. Finally, she spoke. "There was an afternoon when you disappeared." The words landed heavily. I frowned. Disappeared. My mother stared into her tea, as though the memory physically hurt. "You were 5. I said nothing. She continued. "It was during one of those summers we spent at your grandmother's house. The village. The garden. The old lane." The details returned easily, but nothing else. No memory of disappearing. No memory of anything unusual. "It happened in July." Her voice grew quieter. "You were playing in the garden. Then suddenly you were gone." A strange sensation settled in my chest. I had never heard this story before. Not once. "How long?" My mother hesitated. "Almost 6 hours." The number shocked me. 6 hours. For a child. In a small village. That wasn't a minor incident. That was a nightmare. "We searched everywhere." Her voice began trembling. "The neighbors helped. Your grandfather searched the woods. The police were called." Each sentence seemed to darken the room. I could picture it now. The panic, the fear, the growing realization that nobody knew where the child had gone. Me, somewhere, alone, missing, and completely forgotten by my own memory. "We thought." She stopped, unable to finish. I knew what she meant. The worst possibilities. Every parent's nightmare. The things nobody wants to imagine. Yet they had imagined them. For 6 terrible hours. "What happened?" I asked. My mother looked toward the window, toward the rain, toward a memory she clearly wished remained buried. "You came back." I blinked. "What, you just appeared?" The answer sounded almost absurd. She nodded. "Near the front gate." My confusion deepened. "Alone, yes." The kitchen fell silent again. I struggled to process what I was hearing. A 5-year-old child vanishes. An entire village searches. Police become involved. Then the child simply returns. Safe. Unharmed. As though nothing happened. It made no sense. What did I say? The question escaped before I realized it. My mother's eyes lowered, and for the first time, genuine fear returned to her expression. "You said you had been walking with a friend." The words sent a cold shiver down my spine. "A friend." She nodded. "You kept repeating it." I stared at her, trying desperately to remember. Nothing came. Only emptiness, a missing piece, a blank space where memory should have existed. "What friend? You couldn't tell us." My mother swallowed hard. "You only said that she was nice." She paused, and that she showed you flowers. The photograph suddenly felt heavier. The field, the flowers, the place I didn't recognize. A coincidence. It had to be. Yet deep down, certainty was beginning to crack. My mother continued. "Eventually everyone assumed you had wandered farther than usual. The police agreed. Children forget things. Imaginations run wild. Life moved on." Her voice softened. "But that photograph." She looked at it again. She was never supposed to exist. A silence followed, the kind that feels almost alive. I studied the image, searching for something I had previously overlooked. Anything. A clue. A detail. Then another question occurred to me. Why didn't anyone ever tell me? My mother's expression grew sad. "Because your grandmother asked us not to." That answer surprised me more than anything else. "Grandma." She nodded. "She believed it would only frighten you. She said the past should stay in the past." For some reason, that response unsettled me deeply. Because my grandmother had always been honest, open, gentle. Yet now I discovered she had helped hide an entire chapter of my childhood. A chapter involving police searches, missing hours, and a photograph no one could explain. The rain outside intensified. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Then my mother whispered something that made my blood run cold. I never saw that photograph before. I looked up. What do you mean? She pointed toward the image. If it had existed back then, I would remember. Her voice shook. I've never seen it. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier, because the implication was impossible. The photograph had been hidden. Somewhere. For more than 20 years. Waiting. For what? For whom I didn't know. But as I looked down at the smiling child standing among unfamiliar flowers, one feeling became impossible to ignore. The photograph wasn't the mystery. The photograph was evidence. Evidence of something that had happened during those missing 6 hours. Something my family never understood. Something my grandmother had chosen to keep secret until her death. And somewhere inside that forgotten summer afternoon, the truth was still waiting. For several days after speaking with my mother, I couldn't think about anything else. The photograph followed me everywhere. It sat on my desk while I worked, beside my bed while I slept, on the kitchen table while I drank coffee in the mornings. No matter where I placed it, I always found myself staring at it. The field, the flowers, the smiling boy, the 6 missing hours. For 23 years, that afternoon had existed as nothing more than an empty space in my life. A gap. A forgotten chapter. Now suddenly it felt like the most important day. I had never remembered. The more I studied the image, the more questions appeared. Who had taken it? Why had it been hidden? And why had my grandmother wanted the story buried? One evening I found myself back at her house. The sale had not yet been finalized. The rooms remained mostly empty now. Furniture had been removed. Boxes had disappeared. The silence felt even deeper than before. Outside, winter had arrived fully. A cold wind moved through the garden. The old apple tree swayed gently in the darkness. I climbed the attic stairs once more. The wooden steps creaked beneath my weight. Dust still covered the floor. The same trunk remained where I had found it. For hours, I searched through everything. Letters, documents, old notebooks, anything that might explain the photograph. Most of what I found was ordinary. Shopping lists, Christmas cards, family records, nothing connected to the mystery. Then hidden beneath a stack of old journals, I found a small envelope. My grandmother's handwriting covered the front. No name, no address, only a single sentence. For when the time is right. My pulse quickened. Carefully, I opened it. Inside was a folded letter. The paper looked fragile, yellowed with age. I immediately recognized her handwriting. The sight alone nearly brought tears to my eyes. For a moment, it felt as though she were speaking directly to me again. Slowly, I unfolded the page. The letter was short, much shorter than I expected. It began simply, "Some memories are too strange to explain while we are alive." I frowned. My heart beat faster. I continued reading. "If you are reading this, then you have found the photograph." A chill moved through me. She knew. Somehow she had always known I would find it. The next lines made my hands tremble. "You were never meant to disappear that day." I stared at the sentence, reading it twice, then 3 times. My grandmother continued, "When they were searching for you, I was searching too. I walked farther than anyone else. I called your name until my voice disappeared." The words felt painfully real. I could almost see her, younger, desperate, terrified, searching the countryside for her missing grandson. Then the letter changed. The tone became stranger, more personal. "Near sunset, I found the field." My breath caught. The field. The one in the photograph. The place I didn't recognize. The place nobody had ever mentioned. My eyes moved across the page. "You were standing among the flowers. You looked happy. You looked safe. But you weren't alone." The room seemed to grow colder. Every instinct told me what was coming next. Yet, I continued reading. "There was a woman with you." For several seconds, I couldn't move. My grandmother described the woman carefully. Young, dark hair, kind eyes, a long pale dress moving in the wind. The description felt oddly familiar, despite meaning nothing to me. Then came the sentence that truly unsettled me. The woman looked exactly like me. I lowered the letter. My breathing had become shallow. The attic was completely silent. Only the distant sound of wind reached me. Slowly I looked back at the photograph. A memory surfaced. Not a complete memory, just a fragment, a feeling, something I had ignored before. There was empty space beside the child in the picture, space that somehow seemed wrong, as though someone should have been standing there, someone partially hidden, someone almost invisible. The next morning I took the photograph to a restoration specialist in York. The man worked with historical photographs, damaged images, faded family records. He listened politely as I explained what I wanted. Then he spent several hours enhancing the image digitally. When he finally called me back into the office, his expression looked unusual, almost confused. "Take a look." The photograph appeared on a computer screen, sharpened, clearer, more detailed. My heart stopped. Someone was standing beside me, a woman, not fully visible, not obvious, but undeniably there. One hand rested gently in mine. I felt dizzy. The room spun slightly. The specialist continued speaking. Something about image degradation. Something about hidden details becoming visible through restoration. I barely heard him, because I couldn't stop looking at her face. The woman looked young, perhaps 30, maybe younger, yet there was something impossibly familiar about her. Something that made my chest tighten. I drove directly to my mother's house. The entire journey passed in silence. When I arrived, I placed the enhanced image on the table. My mother stared, then covered her mouth. Tears appeared instantly. Neither of us needed to say it. We both saw the same thing. The woman looked exactly like my grandmother. Not similar, not resembling. Exactly. The same eyes, the same smile, the same face. Only decades younger. It should have been impossible. My grandmother would have been an elderly woman when the photograph was taken, not a young woman standing in a field. The image defied reason, logic, time itself, yet there it was, captured forever, proof of something neither of us could explain. My mother cried quietly, not from fear, from grief, from longing, from the overwhelming desire to see someone we loved one more time. Weeks passed, then months. No new answers appeared, no hidden records, no forgotten witnesses. The mystery remained. Perhaps it always would. Yet strangely, my need for answers began to fade, because somewhere along the way, the photograph stopped feeling frightening. Instead, it felt comforting. The final piece came unexpectedly. One evening, while sorting through the last of my grandmother's belongings, I discovered another note tucked inside an old recipe book. Only a single paragraph. Only a few lines, but they changed everything. It read, "If one day you find the photograph, do not be afraid. There are moments when love refuses to obey the rules we understand. And sometimes when someone is truly lost, love finds a way to bring them home." That was all. No explanation, no solution, no attempt to solve the mystery, just those words. I sat alone for a long time afterward, the photograph resting in my hands, the note beside it. Outside snow drifted slowly across the garden. The world felt quiet, peaceful, and for the first time since discovering the picture, I smiled. Because maybe the truth wasn't meant to be solved. Maybe some stories aren't puzzles. Maybe they're gifts. I still don't remember those missing 6 hours. I probably never will. I don't remember the field. I don't remember the flowers. I don't remember the woman holding my hand. But I know this. When I was lost, somehow I came back. When my family was terrified, somehow I was safe. And hidden inside an attic for more than 2 decades waited a photograph that seemed to whisper the same message my grandmother had spent her entire life teaching me. That love does not disappear when people do. That family remains with us in ways we cannot always understand. And that sometimes in the darkest moments of our lives, the people who love us most find a way to guide us home, even after they are gone. The photograph still hangs in my living room today. Visitors occasionally ask about it. I usually smile and tell them it's an old family picture, which is true, because that's exactly what it is. A family photograph. The only difference is that nobody can explain how it was taken, and perhaps that's exactly how my grandmother wanted it to be.